Factory drivability.
It's at 866-594-4150. What's caught your attention in the automotive world?
Well, it's not always the most exciting subject to start the show with. We like to have, sometimes we can prime the show
We like to
with a subject.
start slow, work our way up.
Yeah, but sometimes you want to bring the energy right away.
This isn't that.
Never know. But just say you had a recall and it was on $3 million worth of vehicles.
Oh,
How many vehicles do you think that would be?
for me?
Just in general.
100?
The recall costs $3 million.
$3 million recall.
It's going to cost you $3 million to recall them.
So
I'd say that's probably 3,000 cars.
Okay, I probably said that wrong.
That makes
I
sense.
think I just screwed that up.
okay.
But that's okay. The point will be fun to get across. How many dollars worth of vehicles are involved in a $3 million recall?
You're gonna just have to.
I'll just have to go with
Just
it.
have to go.
Well,
past.
the answer is there's just one,
Okay.
and it's a Bugatti.
Oh, sure.
And so there is a single recall on $3 million worth of Bugattis. From the final assembly of Automotive News, this story comes on, and it says that they're recalling just a single 2018 Chiron to inspect screws that fasten the front frame. So it's a single recall. I would suppose that'd be a little easier to administer.
I think so. Do you even have to issue a recall? Can't you just call them?
I think so. Hey, Bob.
Can't it just be a he call?
Hey, who's got the Chiron?
Right.
Is that Bob or Tim?
Right.
Or Stacy? Who's got it? Stacy, get it in here. But this single vehicle recall is pretty rare. Bugatti sells only about 80 vehicles per year, and while the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration sees an average of about 650 recalls involving 25 million vehicles annually, interesting number, it's quite unusual for an action to involve only one vehicle at a time. When those do happen, loose screws or bolts are a common culprit. Jaguar Land Rover once recalled one 2020 I-Pace for missing front seat fasteners. Mercedes-Benz did the same for a lone 2020 GLE 350. And Lamborghini called back a 2021 Aventador SVJ Roadster because improperly tightened screws on a heat exchanger could cause an oil line to detach from the $574,000 vehicle.
Huh.
All of which goes to show that even assemblies of the most bespoke and expensive vehicles in the world sometimes overlook one of the most important principles of automaking, let alone everyday life: righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So
how does that? Here's what I imagine. Oh, Shannon, I used your torque wrench yesterday, and you had it set at 18. That was weird.
yeah.
Oh no. When's the last time you used that? May 4th. Oh, geez. We got to go back. How does that? How do they? Huh?
How do they
Are
know?
these screws yours, Chris? What do these go to?
I picked up your toolbox, and this was rattling around.
And Chris is like, "Hey, is the car working? No, we don't need those."
right. That's right.
Well, and then it goes on, and a more normal recall is that just recently Hyundai is recalling 239,000 cars, and this time something else is exploding inside the car, and it's the seat belts.
Oh, sure.
They're having a problem with a certain number of vehicles, and it involves the 2019 to 22 Accents, 2000 to 21 to 23 Elantras, and 21 to 22 Elantra HEVs or hybrid electric vehicles. And the vehicles need to get to the dealership to have a seatbelt pretensioner. They'll put some sort of a cap they're putting on it. But during a crash event, when the pretensioner, which is an explosive device that explodes and pulls a cable, a lot of times to tighten the seatbelt just before impact, apparently on certain vehicles, they are detonating like a little bomb when they explode, kind of like the Takata airbag situation, but this is off to your side where the seatbelts are mounted, and they've got a protective cap they're going to add to your vehicle to deflect, I'm guessing, or
contain
the problem if you have that explosion take place. So
it's like right on your side, like under your butt.
Yeah, but
So-
depending on how that pretensioner is set up, some are in the pillar, some are in the seat. Yeah.
You don't want that cap to bust because it bust a cap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Russ,
not good.
Yep.
Russ.
Want to make sure it's sturdy.
That's usually my kind of joke.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Taylor. You're on the End of the Hood Show. Taylor, what can we do for you? Taylor, are you there?
Yep.
Go ahead.
So I got a 2003 Chevy 2500 pickup, and it doesn't do it all the time, but it'll do it once in a while. Like after you drive it just for a little bit, you go to you stop and you go to take off, and it like revs up like normal, and then it shifts into overdrive almost. Then you go to try and give it some more gas, and it revs up for just a little bit, and then it goes bang, like right back into overdrive.
Well,
I didn't know if that's like a sensor or something in the transmission, or if it's like the valve body is sticking or something.
what you're describing kind of sounds like the transmission is slipping as you rev it up, and then when you let off the throttle, it finds the first and only gear it can find, which is a higher gear, whether it's overdrive or third or something like that. It's finding a higher gear. It'll skip over a gear if you've got one that's slipping. If it's burning up a gear in the transmission, it'll go first, third, first, overdrive, whatever it has to do to get into that next gear it can find if it's slipping. And then when you give it a little gas, what's happening is it downshifts. Let's say it's in overdrive, it's going to downshift to the gear that's missing, and it's going to rev up, and then it's going to go back into that gear when you let off the throttle. So the first step is to scan it and see if there's any codes. There should be a code for that slippage in there if it is a gear that's slipping.
Is that a code that won't set off a check engine light or a trouble light?
A lot of times it won't,
Okay.
Chris, but sometimes it will, but most of the time it won't. And once you verify there is an issue there, they'd have to put some gauges on the transmission, check the pressures in it to find out if it's something catastrophic inside or if it's being caused because we've got a valve body that's got a valve hanging up in it, solenoid that's not opening and letting the oil flow.
And let's hope that's what it is. And if it is something like that, you need to get that inspected as soon as possible because you are going to do damage. If you haven't done damage already by the slippage, you will. And so we always talk about this, and it's not a science. Well, it is a little bit of a science if you're used to doing it, but for the vehicles that still have a dipstick that you can easily access, just inspecting the fluid is step 1, 2. Is just to look and see, is my fluid level where it should be? And what is the condition of the fluid? And when we talk about the condition of the fluid, a little bit of discoloration is not abnormal in a vehicle that's got miles on it. It's not abnormal at all. But you should not have that distinct burnt smell. You shouldn't have a real dark color, just a burnt type situation on the fluid. And you can smell it. You can know it. If you're slipping clutches, you can smell that smell. It's unique. It's particular. It's like ren grease that gets hot. That's a particular smell. It's just different than the normal fluid.
Is there any good news in that it's happening intermittently, so it might be catchable?
Yeah, there is. Usually if it's a clutch that's gone, it's
All the time.
You can't put the material back on the clutch.
Right.
It's just gone, that's good news. I would hope that you could maybe find a valve body that's sticking a little bit and get that
so if
thing
you check
fixed.
that fluid and the fluid doesn't smell completely burnt and you know it's an intermittent problem, let's get that in for an inspection right away so they can check those pressures, check those codes, and
Save you money.
Save you a transmission.
Taylor, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show.
Be sure to visit our website for news, contests, and previous shows at underthehoodshow.com. Welcome back, everybody. It's time to get back under the hood with the Motor Medics.
866-594-4150. From the Autotempest.com studios, all the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show, Autotempest.com/hoodie. Now let's talk to Dave. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Dave, what can we do for you?
I have a 2017 Buick Enclave. It's got the 3.8-liter engine in. I typically change oil around 3,000 to 5,000 miles and send in a sample. I just got my oil report back. I'm a little concerned because they said that the aluminum and the iron is a little bit high, and said there's been some issues with timing chains in these type of engines, and that could result in the higher aluminum and iron readings, and it might be time for a closer inspection. I'm wondering, Russ, if you've heard of any issues with these engines in that car, and that's a possibility. It's only got like 42,000 miles.
Well, I just want to double check one thing. 2017 Enclave, and did you say 3.8 or 3.6?
3.6.
Okay.
I think it's 3.6. Isn't that what the standard engine is?
That should be 3.6 in there. I thought I heard you say 3.8, and I didn't know if there was another option. We try to keep track of that stuff. I just wanted to make sure we're talking about the same engine because
I got a head cold, and I might have.
Oh no, that's all right. But there obviously there's a history with those 3.6s that goes back a number of years with the timing chain set, but it's gotten improved over the years. But at the same token, there's a lot of engines that have history with timing chain sets with lubrication questions. But when you've done what you've done, which is above and beyond by having a good oil change interval plus sending in a sample, that's way above and beyond what most people do.
Yeah, but we have had some issues with those. We've got 3 of them in our shop right now for this same issue. We're putting timing chains in them. And then once they go too far, the chains break or they jump several teeth and they ruin the engine. So there is really not a lot of closer inspection. The inspection is you wait, you listen, and when they start to rattle, you know that that's the timing chain, and at that point they need to be taken apart and have chains put in them. But yeah, you've got enough age on it. The miles really don't matter. We've seen them 40,000 miles to 190,000 miles with chain issues. So you're probably looking at chains, and if you've been sampling the oil and all of a sudden now this is what you have, yeah, it's time. These engines, we tell people 3 months, 3,000 miles, period. No other way around it if you want to keep the engine for a long time. Some people go quite a few miles over. And out of the ones that we have fail on that 3.6 in our own shop, probably 19 out of 20 of them were regularly well over on their oil changes, 2,000 or 3,000 miles every time. And so that means, over that 3, they're in the 5,000-6,000 mile range every time they're changing their oil. And it's just what happened. But that's pretty typical of, at least in our own shop, most of the car owners we see are several thousand miles over every oil change. I think it's just becoming a standard. So many people for so long, heard from the manufacturers, let's go longer and longer and longer, that they kind of got that in their head, and it's kind of one of the least of the priorities. A car will go for quite a while if you don't change the oil, and then all of a sudden it won't, and then it's fixed, and then people are more apt to think about when to change it after that engine fails.
I feel weird with your phone call because you have done, it sounds like, what we would recommend.
Pretty decent job of it.
Yeah, and so to have what could be that problem,
but they still fail.
Is
sometimes
it's sad. But is there other things in the engine, Russ, that could be giving him that same metal? There is. I just know there is other things in that engine that could be giving those same metals with some wear that occurred.
There is, but he's got aluminum, so it's not bearings. It'd be coming out of the timing chains, and he's got iron, which is going to be coming out of the timing chains, not out of the, unless he's got connecting rods that are starting to come apart, but that's not
He'd have
normal.
A related noise at that point.
We have never had a knocking 3.6 engine for rods or bearings ever. It's just we've never seen one with a rotating.
Well, I know because we've had them with
issue.
170,000 miles where we've taken them apart and put the chains in them because
and
they were
been
showing,
fine.
And the engine works good after that.
Yeah, and we've checked compression on those engines, and we've still got almost full compression on engines with almost 200,000 miles. So we put the chains in.
All right, for this listener.
But it doesn't, just because he's got a little elevated level now, doesn't mean
that's
that
what
it's going to fail today. Watch these levels. You might go another 4 years and see those levels continue to go up until there's an issue.
I think this might be a case of him knowing too much.
That's what I was going to say. Don't sample your oil. That's what I'm learning.
Dave, what are you thinking right now as we talk to you?
Well, I don't want to blow up an engine because I've had a Chinese break and it cost me $4,000. Fix the engine now. It's probably 10 years ago, and I'm sure it's still going to be expensive. So, is it cheaper to put a chain on right now? What's that going to run? A couple $1,000 to do that versus
closer to $4,000
rebuild or what?
Yeah, closer to 4,000. Yeah.
Because you got to remove the engine basically.
You take the motor and transmission and frame out the bottom of the car, then you tear the engine down. You have to take it off the frame, tear the whole front end off, change all the chains out, put it all back together. It's all
Dave,
big
I
job.
guess I want to tell you something here.
But if it's not making noise, we don't fix
Yes,
them.
exactly.
I don't hear any rattling noise and things
No,
like
I-
that.
You
You might
will.
remember.
When it happens.
Oh, you will when it, because it's still quiet up front. I just,
No.
I'm trying to be active, and I'm the guy that called a few months back. I said I was the anti-Chris because I changed my oil too often to
Yeah,
prevent this type of thing, and yet I get this report that says I'm not doing enough. So
I personally think you know too much right now.
Yeah.
I think you should.
You've
That
got a
if the engine's
foresight
running
of the
smooth
future.
and it's running good, it's not making any noise. Just keep changing your oil, and I think that thing is going to go a long time. And maybe do a spot sample again if you think you want to in 20,000 miles if you don't hear any changes in the way that it runs, and see keep your report and see if it's any different
There you go.
than what you have now.
And then listen for that noise. And
Because
when it-
because the repair that you need to do, if that is it, is going to be the same repair today, 20,000 miles, another 50,000 miles. It's the same repair, and it would give you some signals before they start getting bad enough that they're going to cause damage. We've had some pretty noisy ones that were still clicking right along.
and if he does it now,
Clicking.
it,
Yes, they were clicking.
will it
That was the-
happen
I-
again? Or if he does it, is the repair changing it enough that it doesn't happen again?
Same chains, same
Okay.
parts. It'll
Yeah.
do exactly the same thing at
I
some
would
point.
keep putting miles on it
Just listen
Yep.
for that
and stop
Rattle.
doing the oil reports every time.
every time. Do
Just-
it every third or fourth.
You're gonna think way too much and
Yeah.
worry way too much.
Dave, thanks very much for the call. 866-594-4150. Let's go to Iowa and talk to Larry. You're on the End of the Hood Show. Larry, what can we do for you?
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. Hey, I've got an 04 that I'm looking at purchasing. It's got 212,000 miles on it, a 5.7 Hemi. His mechanic is telling him that he's getting liquid in the engine oil, although I don't see it on the dipstick. What are some problem areas to look at on a 5.7 with that many miles?
Not driving it enough, short trips. That's pretty common. You pull that big oil cap off of that thing and have moisture and condensation on the bottom of it.
Are they losing fluid? Did they tell you, or are they just seeing that on there?
I think they're just seeing that on there. I do not see it on the dipstick. I drive the truck. It is a lot of short trips.
Yep. You're going to get condensation on the bottom of that big oil cap that they have, that big funnel oil cap they got on the front, and it's normal. If the truck is not driven and fully warmed up, like a 30-minute to an hour drive every time, you're going to get that condensation. Now, if you were to get in that truck and look at that cap and see that condensation, put it back on, and then go drive that truck for a 3-hour trip, you can pull that cap off and it should be dry in there because it's going to burn all that moisture out of there, that condensation. That oil's going to get hot enough to do that. I bet it's just not being driven enough. If you were getting anything in there, it has to come from the coolant. It's the only way you get moisture in the engine that's not, normal. That's going to come from a leak, and then you would lose.
Yeah, that coolant system is going to be low, and if the coolant system's not low, this is what's going on. It's just got to be driven more.
So is it something to worry about in buying the vehicle, or you just know you got to drive it? It hasn't, knowing that it's there.
Well, Chris, let's be realistic. You got to be a little nervous buying a 212,000 mile vehicle.
Right.
The things could happen.
It's almost 20 years old.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
things could happen. I mean, you and I know that. So I think you're not going to ever get a for sure on a used vehicle with that kind of age
Right.
on it. Just all there is to it.
Larry, good luck. 866-594-4150. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show. 866-594-4150 from the Autotempest.com studios. All the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show. And when you call the show, you might win a hoodie from our friends at Universal Technical Institute.
You never know. It's random. Could pop up anywhere. Universal Technical Institute, uti.edu.
We love random drawings.
We do. We've
happen.
last couple weeks we've just surprised people and said, "Hey, you've won a hoodie." They thought maybe their name would be called in the middle. But lately we're just giving away a few, just
That's right.
giving them out that way instead, and they're pretty excited about it.
It's always best to be after the first segment of the show, though, because we forget
Yeah.
until we get to now, and
So-
then we do it.
Universal Technical Institute, they've got so much to teach you about cars. It's a big career field. There's so much in it. You've got electrical, you've got air conditioning, you've got the undercar stuff, which we call, your suspension, steering, all that kind of stuff. And you could specialize in any part of it or learn all of it and be kind of a mechanic of all the trades. At our shop, all of us do everything under the cars pretty much, but there are specialized areas. You could go get trained just on diagnostics and be a diagnostician, where you were checking out your electronics. A lot of women get into that field. Not a lot of heavy lifting. There's a lot of small women that are in that field that say, I don't want to get my hands covered in grease every day. A lot of guys too, and I don't really want to tear apart stuff under the hood. I want to get in the car. I want to check electrical values. I want to find out exactly what's going on, and I want to use my brain to really think about, think smarter, not harder, and say this is what's wrong, and then they pass it along to the next guy down the line. There's a lot of dealerships that work that way.
That's what I would want to do.
So
A diagnostician.
I'd save money on gloves.
yeah, there you go. So there's a lot of things to be learned, but there's explore your career. Go to uti.edu, Universal Technical Institute, and see what is available. And you might be saying, I don't know if that's for me. And then when you go look at the website, you may decide, oh, this is for me. This is something I'd like to do.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Matt. You're on the End of the Hood Show. Matt, what can we do for you?
Hey, gentlemen, thanks for taking my call.
Bet.
Hey, I've got a 2014 Ram 3500 HD. I just bought it last December. Loving my truck, but my service light just came on a little bit ago saying that I need to replace my fuel filters. I'm a busy guy, full-time job, have a side hustle as well. And so, I can definitely take it into a shop to get that done. But, I watched a YouTube video and, I was like, okay, what if I were to do this myself, what am I getting into? Is this something that you'd recommend? And obviously this would be my first time doing it. Never had to do that before, but is this something that you'd recommend that I take it into a shop, or do you think it's, pretty much anyone with the right tools and YouTube could handle?
Hold on a second, Matt. I want to go back to something he said. He said a light came on a little bit ago, and he's watched a YouTube video since. So how long do you think was a little bit ago? Because I know if I said the light came on a little while ago, my next qualifier would be before Christmas.
I'm guessing, should we bet lunch on this, guys?
Yeah.
Between the three of us? I'm guessing 4.5 weeks since the light first came on.
4.5 weeks. All right.
4.5 weeks for Russ. Who's
Shannon?
closest?
Last week.
Last week. I'm going to say I'm taking the over on 4.5 weeks because I'm just going to be true to myself. And I'm going to say it was longer than 4.5 weeks ago. So you've got now to a week ago. You've got a week ago to 4.5 weeks, and I have the rest.
This is like Price is Right.
Yeah,
You just
it's
came in
exactly.
with the final bid.
Yeah. $1 over. Matt, when did the light come on in your estimation?
1 week ago.
Oh, Shannon.
Shannon
Well
wins.
done. Shannon gets to buy lunch. Congratulations,
That's
Shannon.
not how that
I
works.
think so.
Well, I'm glad that you were addressing it in a reasonable amount of time. And yes, you can do it yourself. Look at the YouTube video, change it, watch. A lot of great ideas out there. We put a lot of stuff out there on YouTube as well, besides the show you're watching now, if you're watching. One of the extreme important things about the whole thing is to keep it clean. When you take the filters off and you put the new ones on, make sure they are spotless when they're going back on, because I've had people just, zip them off and put them back on, and they've got a little dirt because the engine's really dirty. Now, a 2014 Ram typically is pretty going to be fairly clean under the hood in that fuel filter area and under the vehicle. They're not awful typically. The older ones leak so bad they would collect a lot of just sludge, grass and stuff would build up. But those aren't awful. Just wipe everything off before you pull the filters off, and then when you put the new ones on, watch closely as they're going on. But you really shouldn't have a problem. You're going to save a lot of money versus a shop. Number one,
that's what I've heard. Yeah.
Cost of the filter plus the cost of the labor, because when you do this, you're going to say, I've got diesel fuel all over my hands and on the floor, and it smells bad and yuck.
Keep that in mind when you do it.
The shops are doing that. So, when you're paying a shop like $100 to change the filters, in some cases, some more, some less, but we typically are doing. It's very rare somebody comes in and says, just change my filters. If you do that, it's going to cost more. But if you say, hey, change my oil, change the filters, I need to put an air filter in it, I'm working on the brakes or something like that, we're just going to charge for the actual time involved. And a lot of times it's pretty sad. I mean, you'll see it says filter change, 1.5 hours, and it's like, how long did it take? 15 minutes? Like, why are they putting that in there? Well, there's a difference on some of this stuff, I mean, that's a value when we're talking about changing ignition coils or a fuel pump or something like that, because there's skill and there's tools and all that, and they learn how to go faster. But some of these things like filters, Chris had a cabin air filter in a Windstar one time we pulled out. He's like, how long did that take? And I said, 30 seconds to swap it out. And he's like, well, the book time says an hour. I'm like, yeah, they're just putting a minimum charge in there. So they're going way overboard on some of those. Some of them are not enough, because I'll tell you what, you'll have a lot of mechanics argue that they didn't get near the time that it would actually take to do some of the
And for
projects.
hoodies listening, this truck is a diesel truck that you've got a high-pressure fuel system that's very important to keep clean and very important to keep the right fuels in. When you buy that kind of equipment, you're talking about an engine in that truck that has a value of probably $9,000 as a used engine. A new replacement is probably $15,000 to $17,000. And it's got fuel injectors in it that if you have to replace all the fuel injectors, you could spend upwards to $5,000 if the injectors get damaged. So you're talking about a vehicle that has a great potential for the work that it can do, the economy that it brings. It's a workhorse, but you got to spend a little more money taking care of it.
I think Matt needs to stay on the phone with producer Doug and get himself a hoodie, because he's going to need one to comfort him after he's done all this work.
Mm-hmm. It'll give him a
Hey,
hug.
thank you guys.
Hey, don't
You're
have the
welcome.
hoodie on when you do the diesel fuel
No,
filter.
'cause it'll
Yeah,
stink
we don't want that
forever.
baby to get diesel stanky.
Does it come out if you get it?
Diesel fuel in gloves, clothes is a tough one.
Yeah, it smells bad, but the worst part about it is when it's in that washer and your
Yeah.
significant other says, why does my washer
Yeah.
stink? I don't know.
Rinse it outside first if you get spilled on it. Put it in your shop sink and rinse it out first.
With
Something.
soap. You got to
Yeah,
use
and
soap.
then- yeah, just
Some Dawn dish soap.
yeah. Don't do that.
866-594-4150. What's caught your attention in the automotive world?
I'm just watching gas prices climb. We had a discussion with some people who really know the industry lately, and it's interesting finding out different things. We were looking. We don't do really the politics of all the fuels and stuff like that, but we did look a little bit about just some basic economics, because right now, if you're listening, what do you care about? You care about when you go to the pump and you grab the handle, how much the dollar sign is, right, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do. I'm really looking at that. Yeah, I'm thinking about some other stuff, but really, basically, I'm going to the pump and I'm pulling the handle. But I was thinking, I asked the question, what would happen if because a lot of people are arguing back and forth on things, but the more the price goes up, the more they just want to say, I just want cheaper fuel. So what would happen if you removed all the ethanol from fuel right now and just said, hey, okay, if you love gasoline, that's all you're going to get. There is no more ethanol in fuel. And I didn't realize the economic impact that has for fuel. So right now it's about, I think they said it was about 13, was that right, Shannon? About 13% of all of the fuel is got ethanol, whether that's E85 or 30 or 20 or 15, but altogether, if you took every drop of fuel being put in cars, it's like 13% or something.
That number seems familiar
Pretty
from the
close.
conversation we had. Yes.
So they said, well, just imagine. Right now we've got a little shortage because we're buying in the war and blah, 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 and it's expensive, right? What if you...
I want to clear up what you just said because
Okay,
I think it was confusing. The average gallon of gas has about 13%.
Of all the gas used, consumed
Right.
in motor vehicles in the United States of America, about 13% of that is in the form of ethanol.
Now, about almost 100% of all fuel sold has
Correct.
ethanol in it.
Yeah, at least
even
like
the stuff
10%.
listed
The point he's
no
getting
ethanol.
at is those.
Right.
If,
I'm
if
talking
it
about
was
every drop.
if it was removed, the
And it
impact
had-
it would have on the price would scare you.
It wouldn't go up 13% because it's 13% of the fuel. So we take the ethanol out. Now the gas companies have to supply 13% more gasoline, and the octane so ethanol makes octane, and it's very cheap octane compared to the other form of octane they
the
use.
aromatics that they have to put in there.
So that would be expensive. So they said it would typically drive, if you're looking at a $4 gallon of gas, it could easily push that to $8 a gallon just by taking that out. And I didn't realize how much of a change there was because we were...
It could easily be $1 to $3 a gallon change if you
Yeah.
suddenly made that.
Yeah,
change.
depending on where we're at, and it'd be on the higher end now because we're so high already. A lot of stuff in there, but that's been in the news a lot lately with markets like that. So, because there's a lot of things. A lot of people look at ethanol, and it costs money to make ethanol. The energy has to go into it, so
Right.
it costs. It costs a lot of money, but there's also side effects of making that product, like the distiller's grains, which are used to feed
Provides a lot of proteins at a very affordable
animals.
price.
Yeah, proteins at the price of corn, which makes it cheap. But I mean, you can throw a bad or good thing into a lot of stuff. But I just didn't realize so many costs involved in those things. But right now, it looks like we're going into summer travels. So, choose your fuel appropriately to save yourself money. Make sure your tires are inflated properly. Go check them
That's
today.
a huge one, right?
Yeah, you're going. It's Memorial Day weekend. Go out right now, fill your tires to the rating on the door. We see a lot of cars when we're changing oil that are in the 28, 29 pound range when they should be 32 to 35, some 45. That's a lot. I mean, that can translate to a mile per gallon if they're really low and worn. And if that happens, a mile per gallon over your 300-mile trip, that adds up. Even if let's say it's $10, it's $10. That's your convenience store money when you go in for that pop, and your hamburger or whatever you're getting. Those are getting up there too. But check some, please.
Beef jerky,
At least beef jerky. Yeah.
barbecue corn nuts.
Check
Is that your go-to?
Barbecue corn nuts are the absolute go-to on road
I
trips.
like the chili lime corn nuts.
Okay.
Or the sriracha ones. Anyways, hey, at least please check your oil. So many people I know that I say, hey, when was the last time you checked your oil? Because we had family come in last weekend. Well, I didn't check it. I checked it. It was a quart low. I'm like, come on.
The last time I checked my oil was
I checked your oil.
my mom's car.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, and we took it to Mike's Texaco. I don't think I've ever checked my oil at a gas station while doing that.
Between oil changes, you mean?
Yeah.
Ever?
I don't think so.
Even back to the day when people used to come out and check your oil, back way earlier, were you too?
Well, I did bring my mom's car in once to check the oil, and the guy got mad at me because he felt like I was old enough, so he threw me a rag, which I felt both guilty and like, that doesn't seem like the best customer service.
I went out to Oregon, I don't know, 10 years ago, where at least at that time, they did not allow you to pump your own gas.
Right.
It's state law. They have to pump your gas.
Uh-huh.
And here comes this little kid, and it's like, you can't do that. You can't do that because I'm putting gas in my car.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, I mean, I can't do that. I know how to put gas in. I've been doing this since way before you were born. And I'm just like, no, you don't understand. It's against the law. And I'm like, get out of here. I don't care. So he goes back inside, and the manager comes up. No, you really can't pump gas out here. I'm like, what do you mean you can't pump gas out here? And he goes, see the sign? I'm like, what? State law. This is stupid. So I don't know. Maybe a listener will call in and tell us, or Send us a message on
think-
YouTube there and say,
I
hey,
think that changed in
that
Oregon, and I'm
changed or
not.
not?
It was New Jersey and Oregon, I think, were the
Eventually,
two.
they probably couldn't get any help.
You just can't buy gas
Pull
now.
in and like, oh,
yeah.
hello,
Sorry,
hello.
it'll be
They
about an
didn't want
hour and a
you to
half.
spill
Can't
it.
do this.
Might as well get an EV. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show. 866-594-4150. 866-594-4150 from the Autotempest.com studios. All the cars, one search, Autotempest.com/hoodie. 866-594-4150. Let's go to Nebraska and talk to Mike. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Mike, what can we do for you?
Good morning. I have a 2006 Lincoln Mark LT, and I've changed the phasers and the chains, roll followers, tensioners at 180,000 miles. Most of them parts are Motorcraft. About 1,000 miles now, I'm getting a P0012 code. And one of the questions I have is, if the chain was wrong from the very beginning, wouldn't it have thrown a code?
Immediately, yes. If there was a problem with the
Okay.
setting of the timing, or if the chain was not right, it would throw that right away. You might have a solenoid that has failed. Did you replace all the solenoids when you did that job?
Yeah. Two new VCTs.
Okay, maybe.
It's on back. I'm getting on bank. Of course, it's on bank one. So I put an old one in, and I'm driving it now a little bit, but it hasn't thrown a code yet.
You might have a failed solenoid. We have put in some engines that right away, remanufactured engines, and right away, if they're the ones that came with the solenoids, we've had a failure in them. And for whatever reason, there's a little bit of dirt in there. Maybe you, when you took it off, there was a little speck of dirt in there. You put the new one on. Now the dirt gets forced up into that actuator. So now you take that actuator off that's dirty, you put the old one back on, and the new one was just a filter for the dirt that was in there. It doesn't take much. It's just a tiny little bit, because those passages are super tiny, because it doesn't take a lot to get 60 pounds oil pressure when you open a little tiny crack to fill the area needed to make that actuate. So it's possible. I'd run it with that old actuator for, another week or two and just see what it does. And if you've got warranty on that other part, just swap it out, because we don't know what's wrong with that part.
Worst case scenario is
I know.
something that we've had experience before too, with people that have went to the work of spending the money for the chains and the phasers and everything, and then they come to find out later that the internal pressures of the oil in the engine, inside of the engine, are worn enough that it can't support the phaser working correctly, and it'll start causing some problems. So let's hope it's that solenoid.
Mike, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. Let's talk to Vernon. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Vernon, what can we do for you?
Okay, did he tell you anything about my car?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, we have a 2007 North Star V8 DeVille Cadillac, 50,100 miles on it. Went about 5 years ago, when I went to start it first thing in the one morning, there was kind of a loud snap, like a electrical snap underneath the hood, or underneath the dash. And I didn't think much about it. And then as time went on, maybe 2 years later, it kept a little bit worse. Maybe about once every 10 times we started, I'd hear the same kind of a snap electrical. And I couldn't tell exactly where it was from, but I think it's the left side of the steering wheel under the dash. Now every time we start, after assist a day or two, I hear that same thing, and it kind of, if you have the radio on at the time when you start it interferes with the radio. But after you drive it, it never does it after it's warm. It's only when it's cold, when you first start it. There's my problem.
This is Mike. I like the way he's approached this too. This is the way I would approach it. I have this problem. Started about 5 years ago, and it was fine at first, and now it's getting worse. But this is
Has it ever affected how the car operates? Anything?
No.
I'm wondering if it's not an AC door in there that's going thump and moving. I've heard that noise in these cars before, but I can't think of anything
to
electrical.
interfere with the radio. It wouldn't be that.
No,
No, and
that's where that nixes that
Your
issue.
particular description is an electrical snap. That's a
But
pretty
you can-
particular description.
You can hear this thing if it's loud enough to hear. Now you can duplicate it every time. The thing to do is to
Oh,
take
it's
it into a
loud.
shop.
It's loud.
So yeah, okay. So he brings it into his shop, and it's gonna have to sit overnight.
So they can hear what it is, and then they start it up and say, "Oh." I would say, if this was me and I knew it was only going to do it once, I'd pull that lower panel off under the steering column.
Right.
Plastic takes about a minute, and I would stick my head under there.
Vernon, you said it doesn't do it after it warms up. If you start the car, turn it off, and start it again, will it do it every time? Will it do it 3 times in a row in the morning?
No.
Okay.
Never.
Just once.
I've tried that.
And are you confident the noise is not coming out of the speaker with some sort of a reaction out of the speaker system?
Okay. Let's start over now. No. The other day I turned the radio on, which when we get home I turn the radio off before I put the car away. We have Sirius radio, so I always turn the radio off. The other morning I thought I'm going to try this. I turned the radio on. I turned the ignition on and turned the radio on. I didn't start the car. Then I went to start the car. So I can't really say it interfered with the radio or not.
Okay. Any ideas on
Well,
this?
yeah, I mean, I would definitely, record it, with my phone while I was listening for it as a person in the shop working on it. But also, so this model car, we just had one of these in there. Remember that red one that was sitting out there, Shane?
I
That
do.
really nice one? Yeah, you can't miss that. It had a bad amplifier in it. And if you let it sit, when you'd start it, it was running the battery down too. But aside from that, you'd start it and you could hear noises in just one speaker because it has amplifier for each speaker in the trunk. And it was making noise with or without the radio turned on.
Okay.
And it wouldn't do it every time. So it's possible that.
And
this
even
thing's
with the
got a
radio
film.
off, that speaker would.
It'll do it.
It'll do it.
Because it's responsible for the chimes in the door when
Right.
you open it. So it has to work with the radio off.
And
so-
it would be that front left.
And it's an electrical noise. It was a crack sound like
That was the first thing I thought of. So
That'll do it for this hour of the Under the Hood Show. Hour 2 is coming up.
Strum's Motor Medics.
Welcome to the Under the Hood Show. From the Autotempest.com studios, all the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show. Russ Evans is here to answer your automotive questions.
Welcome to the Under the Hood Show. Thanks for joining us.
Shannon Nordstrom is here to do the same.
welcome, hoodies. Thanks for tuning in so we can help you tune up.
I'm Chris Carter here to answer your calls at 866-594-4150. The Under the Hood Show is brought to you by Sturdivant, and we have a complete, fully stocked call bank. So rather than talk about what we've seen in the news, let's get right to the calls. We'll start in Michigan with Tom. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Tom, what can we do for you?
Love your show.
Thank you.
I have a 17 Traverse, and I bought it about 2 years old. Just about 100,000 on it. 6 months after I bought it, I noticed the volt gauge, fluctuating. It seemed like it went down the most when I was on the highway driving. And I, just to make sure the gauge was doing what it should, I took a fluke heater and plugged it in a cigarette lighter while I was driving, and the heater was true. The fluke proved that. Yet, when I was just moving it around and stuff like that, it measured 14 and a half. I just noticed it on the highways up the most. But I also was having dead battery, so I put a checker on the battery and didn't test to it. So I just replaced the battery. good for over a year. And now I'm having the same problem again. The battery check's perfectly fine. The question to you is there anything other than the alternator that I could be looking at?
The alternator is one of the prime areas of failure on these vehicles. We've put quite a few of them on, but the alternator does control that. But I bet you're going to find that it's in the alternator just because of how many of them we've seen. I don't think we've.
Oh, that's good to know. At least
We haven't had to. We've had to put batteries in. We've had to put alternators in, but so far we haven't had to put a computer in to cure this problem. Usually it's just the brushes in the alternator wearing, and then it starts getting a little weird, especially at lower RPMs. It'll fluctuate. The headlights will go dim and bright. You know, just you'll be able to see them when you're sitting in a parking lot up against a wall or something. You'll see the lights go up and down. That's pretty common on those. Just something on the 3.6 engine. That's another thing they have is alternators that seem to get a little strange.
Well, and just for hoodies listening out there are other vehicles, and Russ, if I'm saying this wrong, correct me, but the theory a lot of vehicles have is they've put computer control on the charging of the voltage regulator inside the alternator so that if you don't need the charging, it'll back it down. And even sometimes at highway speeds, it'll back it down if you don't need it because they want to cut back as much resistance as they can on the engine for fuel economy.
Exactly.
And so there are vehicles that you'll watch and you'll get some inconsistent voltage readings because the computer is controlling it in such a way. And so that is a thing that I don't know if this vehicle falls into that category that would be that noticeable, but there is another segment to it. So asking this question is a good question to ask. It's just gotten to be where it's not like the old GM alternators where they would just sit there and they were charging all the time and the voltage regulator would say, okay, I'm done now. It's all computer controlled now on a lot of the vehicles. So definitely a good question to ask. So thanks for being a hoodie and thanks for asking that question.
Tom, thanks very much for the call. 866-594-4150. Let's talk to Ben. You're on the End of the Hood Show. Ben, what can we do for you?
Say, I've got a little sweetheart of a problem I'd like to run by you guys since I was listening to the radio today. Okay. I got a 05 Lesabre, and she's just a little sweetheart. I thought I'd do her some justice and give her a little tune-up this morning. New filters, changed the oil. And I was getting on the spark plugs, and once you know it, I think it's number 4 on the backside, middle. Taking it off, and the porcelain portion of the spark plug broke off. The threaded end still in the cylinder head where it mounts in. So, of course, what does a YouTube mechanic do? He gets on YouTube, says, well, how do you get this out? So I thought I'd ask you guys, since I was listening to your radio show, what I've been reading is get yourself a number 5 easy out and try to do that before I, eventually have to take it to the mechanic and he's got to fix it. But I figured I'd give it a shot myself.
You said the porcelain broke off. You didn't say that the nut and the porcelain broke off, but it did?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
well,
bad.
the nut is off.
Ooh.
The threaded end is still inside.
Because at first when you said the porcelain broke, neither one of us even flinched.
How hard does it have to be in a 3.8 engine in a 05 Lesabre to not get it out? I don't think I've ever had a spark plug not just come right out of one of those. Wow.
Maybe it's not as much of a sweetie as he says it is.
Well, she didn't cost me too much. I was getting such good fuel mileage, I figured put some plugs in it, maybe get a little bit better. I was getting a little greedy, but
how many miles?
I don't know. She's a nice little car. 180,000.
Okay. Have the spark plugs ever been out of it that you know of?
Boy, it didn't look like it by the rust on them.
A lot of years of different metals working there, that's for sure. But
so the rear the rear center one is stuck in there. Oh, fun.
Yeah, the one that's the hardest to get at,
Why couldn't it be the front one?
Well, that's probably why it broke too, because he probably had a funky angle on it when he was torquing on it.
Or maybe they couldn't get it.
I had a funky angle, but it
never changed it.
Oh boy! So what are you gonna do, Russ?
You could
I'm gonna bring it to Russ.
You can try that easy out. I mean, you do the best you can. The problem is going to be is how much trash falls into the cylinder, because when that breaks off, then everything can fall out the bottom. Hopefully, the electrode, on the end of it will be held in there with, by the metal in there.
I did get a vacuum.
Okay.
I rigged up my vacuum, tapered down some hose, and I vacuumed all the stuff out of there.
Good.
Put my camera down there on my phone to check it to make sure the debris was cleared, and it looks clean around it, but yeah,
Get
I
the
guess
ease
that
out.
tip could fall off.
That's the next step. Then get the easy out and try to pull it out.
Explain that. What's an easy out?
Well, it looks like a screw, but instead of the screws with their ramp angle starting at the front and winding clockwise around it, so when you turn it clockwise, it pulls itself in. It's counterclockwise. So when you screw this thing in and then it bottoms out, it's
It begins to screw the
lefty-loosey. So
Right.
you're turning it to the left, and it can't turn anymore because now it's wedged in the hole,
So
and it pulls out whatever's in there. The other direction, it
In
would just
theory.
tighten it up. In theory, yeah.
How does it work for the shade tree mechanic? What's my percentage of it working?
Well, it depends on how stuck that spark plug is.
Okay.
If it's not very stuck, you can pull it out. You don't want to break that easy out off in there.
Right.
But you don't want to drill in there, because if you drill in there, you're going to get metal in the cylinder.
Did all the rest of the plugs come out with just normal, what you'd consider normal effort?
Oh yeah, easy. Even the other back too, and honestly, I think that number 4 is the easiest one to get out of the 3 in the back.
So,
And that one was the straightest shot where I had a nice clean angle with my ratchet and my extension. The other 2 were kind of funky. I was more worried about them, but this one, I got the socket on, got the extension on with the ratchet, and I made just one little bit move, and it just broke off.
might have already had a problem. You know, Ford makes a
Possibly.
there's a toolkit we use on the Ford trucks when the spark plugs break off in the 5.4 engines. You may be able to use that as well to try to remove that. That would be something a shop would need to do. I don't know if you can get the tool in there.
Well,
With
let's
that
just
short
hope that
clearance.
this broke because of just some funky angle or move that he made, and then it
It
was
may screw right out.
it might just come right out with that easy out. Let's
By
just
hand
let's
without even
hope
a
for
wrench.
the best. But if not, it could have had corrosion in there, some sort of galvanic corrosion between the metals, and or moisture had gotten in there because maybe it was loose or something, and then it's just going to fight you. So, would you use like a blaster at all before you started, or not, or?
Oh yeah, you know, it could be rusted up in there. So before you even mess with it, it's obviously disabled now. I'm going to put PB blaster around the threads, but I don't want to put a lot on there because we don't want to fill that cylinder with a bunch of stuff. So, I mean, that's nice that the PB blaster's got a dial on it now. You can just
Is it troll flow straw
yeah.
in there?
Put a drop in and then come back in 2 days and put another drop in. And
Well, use your camera phone so you can see down again, like you said you were
You
doing.
want to get it around the edges. You don't need it in the center where you're going to run the easy out.
And if you can see down there, then just put it on the edge, just enough. But I would do it. Yeah, I'd do it once a day for 3-4 days in a row, Chris, and then I would try that ease out. And if you're lucky,
It's
it
going to
might
come out.
just-
I can feel it. It's going to come out.
I had an EGR tube, one of those Ford EGR tubes that always strip out on you, and I was working it back and forth. And I said, "This is tough," and then I put a few drops of that on there, of the PB blaster. And I went to lunch. I got busy on some phone calls, and I came back and put the wrench on it. And I thought I was going to work it back and forth again, and it threaded off. It just came off. I was like, "That's awesome."
let's hope that works for you,
Yeah.
Ben.
Win.
It's his little sweetheart. It's going to be okay.
Ben, thanks for the call. 866-594-4150. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show. 866-594-4150 from the Autotempest.com studios. All the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show. Autotempest.com/hoodie. Now let's talk to Steve. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Steve, what can we do for you?
I've got a 2007 Kia Sedona little minivan, 160,000 miles. Never had any warnings or, I guess, advice on, do I need to change the timing change at some point, or do I just go till it's not working?
The timing chain in that engine is considered the life of the engine in most cases. In most cases.
Okay.
You're seldom, and Russ, you can correct me quickly on this if I'm wrong, but in very few cases are you ever going to see a vehicle with a chain like that when you go into your maintenance guide that they're going to have an interval on that in the consumer maintenance guide.
They should almost on a 3.6 Chevy.
Yeah, but they're designed to last the life of the engine. It could become the weak link, yes, but so could a piston, so could something else in the engine, so could a bearing. But that is not something that most people should be considering, I don't think, doing. Because here's my opinion. 07 Sedona, it's of an age now that is getting to be commonplace that people are keeping longer and running them longer. A study just came out, and the average age of a vehicle in our fleet in the country has moved up to 12 and a half years almost, which is a full year from the last time I remember reading the studies like that, because of the pressure on the automotive industry. So people are keeping vehicles longer, but if this were to go to 250,000 miles and fail, let's say, you're going to spend $5,000 to $6,000 to put a good used engine in that vehicle if you could make that choice. A recycled original equipment engine. Find an engine with 80 to 120,000 miles on it. You can do a Carfax check. You can make sure you're getting what you're paying for, wherever you're buying. Most people are honest, but you always want to check. Just replace the engine. If you were to go in and put a timing set in this vehicle, you're going to spend similar money by the time you take it out, get the parts, if they're available. On some of the foreign engines like this, some of the Korean stuff, it can be hard sometimes to get those pieces to even consider replacing that timing chain. So the long answer is the same as the short answer. Don't worry about it.
Okay. So these engines are fairly good. They'll last quite a while.
You know what? We see good results from a lot of engines as long as they're maintained well. We see bad results from a lot of engines if they're not maintained well. And so if you are a good maintenance person and you drive the vehicle good trips, 30 miles now and then, quite a bit, not a short trip vehicle, I think that's going to last you a long time.
Very much.
Steve, thanks very much for the call. 866-594-4150. Let's talk to Dan. You're on the End of the Hood Show. Dan, what can we do for you?
Hey guys, I have a 2000 Park Avenue, just a regular. It's not a supercharged one, and my wife drives it, and it was doing an erratic idle, and then she said that it kind of surged on her. This is when she was in town driving, and then we traded cars. We got another Park Avenue. We each drive them. And then, so I drove it home from South Sioux up to Elk Point. Actually, I had to go to the courthouse. But I noticed that the idle was searching when you're sitting at a stoplight or what have you. And then when I was going down the road at 65, which is about 1,800 RPMs, every once in a while it'd just kind of drop off like it just died, and then come right back on. It'd drop about 300-400 RPMs, then come back. And I checked the codes. I got a mass airflow sensor code, intermittent, and I did just put a new aftermarket one in here about a year ago, and I know them things sometimes are junk, so that would make sense with the searching at idle, but the dropping off at speed, that wouldn't be a mass airflow sensor. I wouldn't think. You guys think it would be like maybe the control module for the ignition module?
That could be. And the mass airflow sensor, yeah, if that thing has a short in the wiring to it, maybe you replace the sensor, but the problem could have been in the connector as well. And if there's a problem there and it's seeing it cut in and out, yeah, it'll make the car cut out. Typically,
even at speed.
Oh yeah, I mean it'll vary your RPM if you were to unplug it and plug it back in at that speed, it's going to affect stuff drastically. But a typical sensor that's connected well with no glitches in the wiring really shouldn't cause that big of a dropout. If it's going to its speed, you should be able to just tap on it when it's sitting there idling there on the throttle body and get it to die. We've seen some engines die when we tap on the mass airflow sensor because they've got a short in the circuit board inside. That's a possibility. the ones that have mass airflow sensors up the tube further, and this one doesn't, it's in the front there, those we see a lot of tubes break and they let air in, and that causes some glitches in them. But if you've got a mass airflow sensor code, it's seeing a dropout in there at some point. It's either the sensor or the wiring, or could even be in the computer itself. Haven't replaced a lot of computers on those cars for mass airflow sensor codes, but we've done some. So it could be in there. It's going to take a little bit of deeper diving with some diagnosis to find out what's going on there for sure.
Is your code there all the time?
I don't know. I just checked it here the other day, and it came up, and it just said it was intermittent. But she had never mentioned anything about it. Searching for or surging, I should say, at idle speed until day before yesterday. So
Well, a lot of times too, if you
like
get.
I said,
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and I did, like I said, I put that mass airflow sensor in. It was not quite a year ago, and I checked it. I made sure it was tight, because I've had that issue before too, where the screws will back out and it'll start sucking a little air and mess with things. But yeah, it was everything seemed tight. And I checked the wiring. I didn't notice any shorts. I mean, there's only 3 wires going to it, so I tested. I didn't notice a short. So.
Well, Dan, stay on the line for a hoodie. Our producer will get your name and address and everything there. We'll get you a hoodie so you can at least you can stay warm while you're trying to figure out what's going on with this car.
Dan, thanks very much for the call. I have an invention.
What is it, Chris?
Can we make a dyno that you can put all 4 wheels on it and you can drive the car in the shop at speed, but I want to put a plate over that so it's like a conveyor belt, but you guys can walk around the car still. There'll just be little holes around the wheels where you can't step.
They have those already.
Do they?
Yeah.
So you can run the car at 65 and go, oh, I'm going to unplug the map, and then see if that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
They have 4-wheel dynos like that. They're pretty cool. It'd be nice to have if we had a couple $100,000 extra laying around to have one of those.
Is that
built into the floor?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then
I think they're around 160 something like that right now for one built into the floor. By the time they do the labor and everything, you can get the roll around ones that go like on a trailer and stuff like that don't measure horsepower and things like that for 75, 80. But once you start adding the equipment to measure your horsepower, that's when those units get expensive.
See, and we don't really need that.
Nope,
do
you
we?
just need the
We
rollers
just need
built
it to
in the
go
ground.
so I can pretend my car's going 65.
Yeah. Then you
Put
can
big
learn those
drums
little
in the
pieces of
ground.
information. Do you know what you call those little pieces of information you learn from that?
Nuggets?
Dino nuggets.
Dino nuggets. Corpolite. 866-594-4150. That's the number here. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show.
Get your planner out right now and schedule your next radio appointment with the Motor Medics.
866-594-4150. From the Autotempest.com studios, all the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show. And every hour of the show, we give a hoodie away thanks to our friends at UTI.
And we just gave one away to
Yeah,
Dan.
I couldn't
who was that
remember.
guy in the Buick?
Dan.
Dan.
Dan of the Buick.
So congratulations, Dan. You won that hoodie. It's all made possible by our friends over at Universal Technical Institute. You can find them on the web at uti.edu.
Here's what I know about Universal Technical Institute. Besides what I've learned here, I read a lot of automobile articles trying to come in here every week with at least some knowledge. And then I forget all the things I read, and I come in and I say, I read a thing about that. And it's something with I think it gets you more mileage or less. I can't remember. But when I'm reading those and they talk about things like the future of cars, the future of hybrid technology, the future of electric vehicles, they always talk to one of the people at Universal Technical Institute because those are the techs that are being trained for the future.
There you go.
So I read about it all the time. They always get comments from the people at Universal Technical Institute. So that's right there. You know that's the place to go if you want to do this.
Check it out. UTI.edu.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Brownie. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Brownie, what can we do for you?
Good morning, gentlemen. As you know, I'm still driving the formerly fastest truck in the state of Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the Circle K the other day, and I saw a pump, and the last pump said, premium, no ethanol. And, of course, I went and asked the young lady behind the desk, and I got the, gosh, I don't know, answer. But I'm wondering if you know if that is premium. I always thought pure, like gas, like premium, was against the law years ago and had to have some ethanol in it.
Some states require an oxygenator in the fuel, so they'll have a minimum of 10% period, but a lot of states, including this one, do not require any. South Dakota doesn't require it, so you could have a premium non-ethanol. Difference is you're going to see the price. You know, if you look at it and go, whoa, that's the most expensive one in the whole pump, yeah, that's probably the premium non-ethanol. The ethanol blends will be lower, in price.
And the premium non-ethanol may have ethanol in it still, right?
It can. A lot of them have additives. So if you go to a state, like Minnesota, you'll see some that says premium, but it's not a high blend. But you'll still see 10% in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
The pump has to be labeled the correct way. For EPA, if it says this pump does not contain ethanol, it's not supposed to contain any. But a lot of times you'll see the little sticker on a pump that says, here's gasoline, here's premium, and here's diesel in the same pump. Or even just to make it simple, premium, non-premium. And then it says may contain up to 10%. Well, then it may contain up to 10%.
Are you concerned that you don't want any of the ethanol in your fuel, Brownie?
Or you're looking for it.
Or are you looking for it?
Oh, no. I'd be a happy man if it's pure premium.
Yeah, but your truck will
and a broke man, too.
Yeah, your truck has no problem with the percentage if they're putting 10% in there or 15%. It is not going to hurt your truck, Brownie.
Nope.
Just going to tell you that. Don't worry about it.
Thanks very much for the call, Brownie. 866-594-4150. Now let's go to Missouri and talk to Dale. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Dale, what can we do for you?
Long-time listener, love your show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
2010 Tahoe, 5.7 motor, 200,000 miles, and it just started smoking when you start it up, and blue smoke comes out, tailpipe, and it lasts about 2 minutes, and then no smoke. But the first 2 minutes, kind of embarrassing. But can you give me an idea of what it might be?
Well, 2010 Tahoe, you'll have that 5.3 engine in there. And I talk about this with people often, and we've talked about it on the show enough. And if you have enough oil being burned, blue smoke, that it's getting out the tailpipe in a modern vehicle.
On startup,
it's a fair amount that's coming out. It could be leaking by the top end and getting into the cylinders. You could have what they call valve stem steels that could be leaking. Is that as common on those 5.3s, Russ?
No, it's not as common, but the startup smoke is common when the valve guides wear on those engines.
And that's actually in the heads then at that point.
Yep. Yeah, we don't see it as much as we used to see it on the old 350 engines, but we do see it occasionally.
Because on startup, that catalytic converter isn't as warmed up yet, so you can still get that blue smoke to penetrate through the exhaust, whereas if it's going down the road and you're burning oil, you'll never see it typically because it just burns it up. But that is something like, how many miles you got on that, you said?
200,000.
All right, you could just have an unlucky break that yours has got one or those guides are wearing out. Russ, if you bring that into the shop, what do you guys typically do if someone's got one that's shooting the blues and they want you to look at it? Will you pull the valve covers off and take a look, or what do you do?
We're going to look at the spark plugs, a couple of them, see if they're all covered in oil, indicating that it's been using oil like that. May do a leak down test on it if we're trying to find out where it's going and it's got lower miles, but truthfully, you get one with 200,000 miles that's got blue smoke. I'm just going to start with the let's replace the engine if you want to get rid of that burning, because with 200,000 miles, if we pulled the heads off and went through them and put them back on, new, valve guides and seals and all that, we're going to fix the heads, but we got 200,000 miles, so that bottom end is going to take a lot more load now, and it may start burning more oil because the bottom, the top end's sealed up good now, and we've helped with the compression and caused some issues.
Are you going through quite a bit of oil, probably, or not?
But the other thing it could be that's not mechanical, that's real common on a 5.3, is the driver's side valve cover wearing out. It's full of sludge.
Yep.
It's building up. So the first thing you want to do.
Glad you brought that up, Russ.
Yeah, before you do anything to this engine, you want to do the cheapest fix. Cheapest check. Pull the PCV valve hose off that driver's side valve cover right at the intake end. If there's oil in it, that valve cover needs to be changed to the updated valve cover. And you're going to need that on a replacement engine as well as this one. So you might, you can reuse it. So you might as well look at that first. If there's oil in it, simply go out and buy the valve cover. Our partner Dorman Products sells that valve cover that's modified for this to prevent that from happening again. You bolt it on. You can do it yourself at home in about an hour, and that may 100% take care of your oil burning, because if there's oil in that tube, it's pulling it out of that valve cover where it's pooling in there and causing it to burn it. That's the most common issue, but valve guides would...
And we kind of went to the worst scenario
though
first.
That can happen, but yeah, as many valve covers as we've put on all engines now, it seems like Ford, Chevy, Chrysler, they're all doing it. It becomes from the build of a sludge in the oil, and then it doesn't allow the cover to drain into the valve or into the top of the rocker box like it should. So it sucks it up that tube, and it causes it to...
I was going to ask
burn
before
oil.
you had the thought that we need to go there with him. Are you going through quite a bit of oil?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I do keep a watch on it, but it's not a lot of oil.
Because you could
look at that tube.
Yeah.
I'll bet you're going to find oil in it, as many of those.
Because it doesn't take a lot of oil from that to make a fair amount of blue smoke. And because if you're not losing quantities of oil, I'd be optimistic.
I'm so glad he stuck around for the second half of that answer.
Yeah, because, I mean, we were...
I don't know why we didn't go there first,
Yeah.
as many of those as we had. But
Well, I think I started it off
It could
going
be
with the
both.
valve stem seals and didn't even think of the valve cover at that point, because that is real common
that's
on
what
those
I thought, too.
5.3s.
It just like in my head.
Dale, good luck. That is such a rare thing now. We were driving down the road not too long ago, and a car was smoking, and my daughter had never seen that. She just had never seen blue smoke out of an engine before.
Did she think it was on fire?
She was like, what is going on there?
What
She
was, Shannon, for you, I don't know, Chris, you might remember too, but what was the last car you can commonly remember driving around our hometown street here with blue? The most common one, if you could pick 10 cars and go, you know what, I see those a lot, sitting at a stoplight, chugging, going, poof, 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 blue smoke. For me, it was the Caravans, the 80s Caravans.
Oh, with the ones with the Mitsubishi 2.6s in them and stuff?
You would see those. I would see those. I can still picture seeing those at stoplights. Poof, poof, poof. Once the 60s cars and 70s cars
Yeah,
disappeared.
I can't remember anything that that is so relevant in my mind that it jumps out. Maybe it'll later, but I just can't think of
Plymouth
anything.
Laser and Daytonas. I see a few of those because it seemed like the converter would just stop working, and it would start passing the blue smoke before they would plug up and not be able to drive, because those cars, they just never plugged up. They could just keep blowing blue smoke. But when we were younger, I mean, high school days, there was blue smoke everywhere.
Yeah, it was common.
A car
at that
go down
point.
the interstate, hey, look, cloud of smoke behind it. And there are some states with laws, no visible smoke, blue smoke.
When
So
that
for
would happen,
polluting.
did you guys ever pretend you were in a rock band and that was smoke on your stage?
No.
Oh, I used to walk
Did you
through
do
the
that?
smoke and yeah. Pretend I was Led Zeppelin.
Would those same laws have the same rules applying to vape smoke coming out of the car?
They should.
Is that blue smoke? Oh, it's blueberry smoke. Oh.
It's a flavor. It's not allowed anymore.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you. 866-594-4150. This is the Under the Hood Show.
Prepare to learn something. You're going under the hood.
866-594-4150 from the Autotempest.com studios. All the cars, one search. Autotempest.com/hoodie. This is the Under the Hood Show. Now let's talk to Brett. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Brett, what can we do for you?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks. Enjoy your show. Say, I've heard you give advice to people in the past for like motorcycles and that. I picked up this 1985 Honda scooter just to run some errands with and that. Runs like a top, doesn't smoke or anything, but I drove it about 10 miles the other day, and when I got home, I noticed a puddle under it, and when I popped the oil cap, it just gushed out of there with gasoline.
Oh,
and just looking for some ideas on how do you start troubleshooting that. And I don't know how, I just got it. I don't know if the previous owner had done some work on it or...
Did you say this is an 85?
85, yes. Carbureted.
Correct.
Yep.
85 Honda Passport scooter.
Yep.
And...
So the Elite 250.
Oh, it's the bigger one. Okay, that's
Yep.
a bigger. Yeah. All right, the 250. I can't, but it runs really good, right? Other
Yeah,
than
it
that?
runs like
all right.
top,
First,
like if it doesn't smoke or...
okay, first step, change the oil immediately. Second step, I
Yep.
believe this one had a vacuum diaphragm fuel pump on it. Otherwise, it couldn't get fuel into it where it needs to go because of the level of the tank. But if that vacuum diaphragm goes bad, then it will pass fuel into the crankcase of the engine. So if you follow your fuel lines from the tank, they should run, if it's got the vacuum diaphragm fuel pump, it's got a line that runs from the tank to the engine and then up to the carburetor. Look at that. You'll need to remove that and check and see if it's leaking, because if it does, it'll just dump gas right into the crankcase as it's running. But the reason I asked if it ran good, if it was running really poorly, like it was running really rich, it could just be loading up so bad it's pushing past the rings and getting into the engine. But usually when you get that much fuel in there, it's got to be sucking it right into the crankcase. If it blew, when you took the cap off, if it just kind of gushed out of there, yeah, that's...
Otherwise, it would run very poorly if it was a float stuck and it was loading up on fuel or something like that.
You get enough gas in there, you'll ruin the crankshaft in it and push it up past the rings and really cause problems. But I would check that first. But I think, these things are still pretty popular. I'm surprised we're not seeing a lot more. The last time fuel went up like 50 cents, we saw scooters everywhere. They were just overrunning those little Chinese scooters that were so cheap.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody's buying them, but I'm not seeing as many as we were. But those old ones are cool. So, yeah, check that out and see if you
You
can
got a
get it
motorcycle
going.
license
All
for
right.
that, Brett?
Yes, I do.
Okay, just checking. Because you have to have one for a 250, don't you? I think you have.
Anything above 49 cc.
Yeah,
in our
That
state.
one's got to be registered. The little Passport doesn't. The Elite, you do.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Scott. You're from Colorado, Scott. That's not what I meant to say. Scott from Colorado, you're on the Under the Hood show. Go ahead, Scott.
All right. I have a 2017 Jeep Rubicon. It's got the Pentastar V6 in it, DVT valve. Occasionally, when I start it, it sounds like it's out of oil. I mean, it sounds like it's knocking, rattling the lifters, but it's at random. Any ideas?
I had that every once in a while with my Wrangler. Same year. It would not, I wouldn't say it rattled like you're describing, but I would get enough of a noticeable rattle that I would stop and go, that didn't sound right.
Yep.
And as quick as I would think that, it would clear up and go away. Is that similar?
Yeah, it is, and it's kind of progressively getting worse. The other concern I have is it carries 93 pounds of oil pressure at operating temperature.
It's got a 2-stage oil pump in it. It's variable. It can adjust, and it sounds like you may have a problem with that. It may be stuck. It may be low when it needs to be high and high when it needs to be low and not working correctly. But you can kind of hear that. If it's 93 pounds at idle and you're sitting there, you should probably hear a little. We've had a couple of them do that, and inside the pan you can hear a bzzz, like like a buzzing noise. Yeah, because it's just
that pump's going so crazy.
Yeah, it's way too high. So that could be a problem with the pump, with the electronics to it.
So
It can be checked.
Okay. So I could pick that up, or a good scanner, pick that up.
Yeah, it's probably going to have a code that says that the pump is, if it's commanded to low and it sees the high oil pressure, it's going to give you a high oil pressure code or a pump code.
Is that I gotta ask myself a question to Russ here? Is that pump in there a mechanical or mechanical with electronic sensor on it?
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, they're a lot of cars are going to 2-stage pumps now. A lot of the new Chevys are doing that too.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, and then, of course, we will tell people too. There's certain vehicles that they would get a run of a cheap aftermarket oil filter that could cause it to drain back too much, and then just not have the oil available for startup. So you may look at if it wasn't for the other symptoms that you told us that we triggered in on. A lot of times it can be as simple as changing the brand of oil filter that you use, trying the OEM filter for an oil change, and see if you notice any change.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. Let's go to California and talk to Joshua. You're on the End of the Hood Show. Joshua, what can we do for you?
Doing quite all right. So I have a 2000 Jetta. It's a little 2-liter 4-cylinder, single overhead cam, and it has about 220,000 miles on it. And I was thinking about changing out the rod bearings since it kind of struggles getting past 5,500 RPMs. So, and I was wondering, do you think that would add some longevity to it? And if so, is there anything that I should know about kind of tearing into the motor for the first time?
Well, I guess I want to bring it back a little bit before we start tearing into this engine and trying to put internal bearings in anything. What's the symptoms you're having with the car?
Well, I want to see if I can get a little bit more mileage out of it, but it's also that this engine normally has problems getting over like 5,500 RPMs, but it kind of sounds like the bearings are just kind of holding it back from spinning past that. The red line is at 6,500, and on normal driving it sounds all right, but it just kind of feels like the bearings are holding it back from spinning any faster.
Just by chance, is this a GTI model? I don't think it is with a 2-liter, but just a standard Jetta?
No, it's just a base model.
And are you trying to,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to ask so many questions here, but I just want to zero in on something that makes sense for you and our listeners too. Are you trying to gain miles per gallon for fuel economy, or are you trying to gain miles of longevity?
Longevity.
Does this thing rattle when you're driving it? Like it sound like bearings are?
No, but when it's cold, there is a slight rot.
Okay. When it's cold, what you might be hearing is what's called piston slap. The pistons in those will rock side to side a little bit, and then once the engine warms up after about 3 or 4 minutes of running, that takes up the space as they swell up from heat expansion, and then they stop knocking. A rod will typically knock worse as it gets warmed up, as the oil thins out a little bit and the pressure drops.
I just want to jump in here. Mechanically, if you're concerned about the engine not being able to rev to a certain point, that's not a mechanical restriction of the bearings.
No.
There may be a limitation of the engineering of that engine on what they consider the safe RPM band, on how far you should rev that before you have problems with the valves floating and
Right.
clearance inside the engine. There's an engineered threshold that they design about any engine for to say, this is the red line. I don't want you cranking this thing past that. And that is, unless you have a severe wear issue in your rod bearings, that's not a mechanical limitation. If it is, you've got a severe bearing problem that the motor's probably going to be in very bad shape because you'd have enough material running around inside the engine. You've probably ruined a lot of things. I think you're overthinking it just by my initial impression of the way you're asking the question. That's why I was asking so many follow-up questions. Before you dig into that engine, you got to understand why you're digging into the engine, what you're going to go after, and what you're hoping to gain. If you have a mechanical problem, a noise, a rattle, a problem, you need to understand what that rattle or problem is and know that, okay, I'm going in here to put these bearings in because I've got a rod bearing rattling. I've got miles on it. You're talking about a short block rebuild on the bottom end with rod bearings, wrist pins, main bearings, that sort of thing, which is not commonly done on those engines. Even though there's kits available, there's just not a lot of people that do it. They typically last quite a long time, even if they do get a little bit of noise in them. But I don't think you're being limited by your rod bearings as far as RPMs or ability for that engine to accelerate or do the things that it does. I'd be more interested in the state of tune of the vehicle.
Outside stuff
Before I even begin to think about digging inside that engine.
Ignition, spark plugs, fuel supply. Is the fuel pump strong? Are we getting good fuel pressure right to the injectors? Those are things that'd be really important. Catalytic converter, make sure it's not starting to get restricted with, a couple pounds of back pressure or something. That would really back it up and cause some rattling too.
It might be worth it for you to spend $150 for, I'm just throwing a number out there, for in California it might be more.
Yeah.
But for an analysis with somebody that has a specialized independent German repair shop. They're out there.
Joshua, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. Kent in Oregon, stick around. We'll talk to you right after the show. I want to come back to a call that came in, I think it was last week. Matt from Wisconsin called with the car thief special. They had a Sienna that could run without the key fob, and we talked about trying to find the key fob because
we were pretty sure it was in that vehicle somewhere, or else it wouldn't run.
And Matt called back. They did find the key fob.
Ooh, where was it?
In the back, in like a pouch along the side. Yeah. And also, after the show, we looked up, you can buy a tool that will help you find an RF reader that will find your key fob or get you pointed in the right direction.
Like a little Geiger counter for a key fob?
I'm picturing like
that'd be fun. That'd be fun to do.
Ghostbusters.
Like a metal detector.
You can get that, though. They're about $45 on the internet. That'll do it for this hour of the Under the Hood Show.
Boy, that went fast.
The Under the Hood Show is brought to you by Sturdivant's. Let's go to Oregon and talk to Kent. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Kent, what can we do for you? Oh, I have to answer his call. Hold on. Glad this was after the show.
Yeah, you just failed there for a little bit.
He's all right.
Now be quiet, because now if we're going to use this, I need an edit point.
I need to behave.
Do your thing, Chris.
Yeah.
Do it.
All right, here we go. Let's pretend none of that happened. Let's go to Oregon and talk to Kent. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Kent, what can we do for you?
Hello, I bought a 2006 Nissan Frontier with the transmission cooler. I guess sprung a leak internally and ruined the transmission.
Oh, not good.
I was wondering if it's okay to display that bypass. I know a lot of people do that. Just to the external cooler.
There is a
Would that
certain
be,
capacity that's designed into the system that I would not compromise. Now, even if you drive that vehicle very light, don't use it heavy. You might think in your mind, I can get away without that. But there is a certain amount of cooling capacity that they need, request, want in regards to that engine. And I would put it back to the OEM spec. Now, you could go get an aftermarket cooler if they don't have special line fittings and replace that, what could be very expensive factory Nissan cooler with a aftermarket that does the same thing, just allows for the passing of fluid through a heat exchange of some sort to dissipate the heat and let cooling come through the fins. Pretty simple procedure, and they make different quality levels by the number of sears that it has and different things, just like a air conditioner. Did I use the right word there? Russ looked at me really weird.
Energy efficiency rating. I just didn't
expect me to say that.
Nah. Well, yeah, that's great.
I kind of surprised myself, to tell you the truth. But you can get different levels of cooling capacity from that cooler, and some of the cheaper ones that you're going to buy aftermarket may not have the engineering that the Nissan one does. But another thing you might do is you could go to Car Dash Part, one of our partners. If it is a super expensive factory Nissan thing, you could probably find a recycled used one that came out of a vehicle that had a rollover or something, and that cooler would be most likely just fine if you got it out of a wrecked vehicle, not a vehicle that had an engine failure or a tranny failure. But if it was a wrecked vehicle, it's most likely in good condition, and you could pick one up, I'm guessing, for give or take $100 or less, and find and put the original equipment one right back in it again.
All right, I'll keep that in mind. So it's kind of weird.
That help you out?
Yeah, that helped me out. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the call. 866-594-4150. We are on the after show, so that number is for a limited time only.
Available for a limited time
That's
only.
right.
Call now.
Well,
Operators
I got
are standing
Look
by.
how I just wrote. Why did I do this? Look how I just wrote transmission. Trans-mission. Like it's two things.
Huh. Were you going to write trans-cooler and you forgot?
I don't know.
Huh.
That's weird.
Interesting.
We need to probably inspect my brain.
You get to go get all original parts.
Last night, we were at the kitchen area of the house,
In the kitchen? Okay. One way to say it.
And I got home a little bit late, and my wife and the girls were all in this area, just hanging out.
The kitchen area?
The kitchen area. Next thing we know, I don't know how it started. Oh, I think one of my kids said something about doing the love language test.
Okay.
To find out what your love language was.
Yeah.
And 45 minutes to an hour later, we are knee-deep into multiple personality tests that we're doing
Right.
online.
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen?
I know
It happens
the
when your
feeling.
daughter's going to school for psychology.
She's
And
experimenting
back,
on
back,
you.
and she's
Yeah.
and she's mentioning different things. And next thing we're doing is a
Does she need a master's project?
Miles Briggs
We could
personality
probably
test.
ruin her grades forever,
Walk
right?
around with a clipboard around you nowadays.
Oh, she analyzed me a long time ago and she's
Yeah.
got it pegged. So she's got it all figured out. But that was interesting.
What's your love language? You remember?
No.
Ask your wife if she remembers.
No, I was
because
30%.
Swahili.
I was 30% something and 20%
Yeah.
something. And,
Nobody can understand it here.
But I do know that there was a certain amount of lying going on as we filled them out.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we're trying to predict what you want the outcome to be based on
Exactly.
not making you look like a pig.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so my wife's profile came up that she was only 3% in the range of liking to get gifts, and I know that's not right. And throughout this quiz, there was at least 14 questions that asked about getting gifts or giving gifts.
Mhm.
She definitely was
lying.
She's not like she goes crazy. She just loves a gift.
Sure, who
It's
doesn't?
not like she wants a gift, but boy, she loves one.
Mhm.
And I would rather give a gift. Good combination.
Yeah, for sure.
But oh boy, we had some good chuckles because it was a 14-year-old, a 20-year-old, and two 50-year-old giver takers were doing this.
My biggest memory of taking the love language test was the reaction of the other person when the person answered it. When the question would be, what do you prefer, this or this? And they would say, this, and the spouse would go, no, that's not true.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the Newlywed Game.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, yeah.
I digress. Sorry.
No, that's what the after show is. It's just digression. I got a text last night because we talked about this. My son got a dash cam, so of course.
Those are accident magnets.
They're magnets.
That's what you said. Remember, I got
yep.
mine. You're like, oh, look, accident magnet.
And how long was it before your dash cam caught you
in an
getting
accident?
A month.
Yeah.
Less than a month.
Oscar's had his for longer than I would have thought before he got hit by a deer. He said, I hit a deer, and then we watched the video, and we were like, you didn't hit a deer. That deer hit you.
By the picture you showed me of the car, he definitely got hit by a deer.
Yeah, he did.
I mean, I don't have to see the video, but I want to.
Yeah.
But he got hit by a deer.
Mm-hmm. And luckily, it was a small deer. You can see it in the video because part of it makes it on camera. Not all of it.
Did it
but
flip
part of
over
it.
the hood? Or
No.
did it just go right
it
down the
didn't.
side?
Just went down the side.
He did that Matrix thing where he jumps up.
Exactly.
Ooh, and then he looked at him and ran right back into his quarter panel.
Well,
We have a call coming in.
He was
Should we just
fortunate
take
that
it
Let's
out?
get it. Let's get it.
the deer hit him.
Right.
Less damage.
Yeah, for sure. You're on the Under the Hood show. Who's this?
This is Clark.
Clark, go ahead.
I'm from Idaho, and I had that 99 GMC that I'm having some trouble with the brakes.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of them things that as soon as I take it to a mechanic, it won't act up.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah, I don't know what to do about it, but there was another thing that was happening with it too, where I started up, it'll die. And then I thought if I hit my brakes, it'd start working, but after just start the key up and it'll die, I'll turn it off, turn it on, it starts up and it acts fine. But while you're driving, it then's when it'll start missing a little bit. I mean, idling real rough when you're at a stop sign. Seems to run fine while you're moving, but so I don't know. And it is throwing some sort of code. The engine light came on.
Well, if you've
So,
got a,
I don't.
Clark, if you've got a code, and you've got an independent technician that you've worked with before, that you feel like you have a good feeling with and a good relationship with, it won't be a wasted trip, because that code is going to lead them to a system that they need to analyze and they need to look at. And so that may or may not be related to the brake issue that you were having. My hunch is it's not. Because if I remember right, you had one brake that was heating up, right?
You would pump the
Well,
brakes.
no,
No, he had the
just-
pump. Yes, that's right. I have two different calls
Pump the
confused.
Yeah. Well, what I just did is I just got back from dropping it off at my mechanic and says, I'm tired of playing with it. See what you can do.
I think that's a good call.
So-
If you got a good feeling with them, they should be able to find it. It's going to be they're going to have a trail to follow. That's for sure. So,
Clark, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. All right. Is there anything else we need to get to on the after show?
Doug, you got anything to throw in over there from the producer side of the fence? He's just sitting there off camera.
Looking all grumpy. Didn't he look grumpy?
That was a grumpy face.
That was a grumpy-
When he
you-
said that, you had a grumpy
Yeah,
face.
you did have a
At the
grumpy
time
face.
he said that.
Now it's beautiful. Now it
We're
looks
better
like
now.
sunshine.
Look at that. What a
Ah.
difference that is.
Where's camera 5? Can we point? It's the outdoor cam. Leave it there. We're good. All right, that'll do it for the Under the Hood show. Thanks, everybody. Make sure if you do watch the after show and you enjoy it, subscribe to the YouTube feed.
Yeah, get it
and
all.
Do all that. That helps us a lot.
An
Thanks,
argument,
everybody.
an argument could be made that this is more fun and shorter, but
Right.
watch it
Maybe
all.
that's the. Is that a coincidence? That it's more fun and shorter?
I think so.
Well, if, on that subscriber thing, so they don't care if we have 1 million listeners. iTunes and the podcast people, they don't care. They go by number of subscribers.
Oh, we just about signed off.
So you can subscribe. That would help us a lot and help other people find the show.
Oh,
It
here's a
used to be the people that downloaded it, and then it used to be people who listened. But now they're on this kick of, it's got to be
Is it
subscribers. So
more
please subscribe.
advantageous to us to have a subscriber that doesn't watch or a watcher that doesn't subscribe?
Both. So if you're subscribed,
Mm-hmm.
but you've got your notifications turned off, so, hey, I don't want to be bothered. That's why I'm not subscribing. No, please go subscribe. But then we're that little bell and the notifications. You don't have to be notified. Just know we're on every week. You've been listening to the show. You know where we're at. But that seems to be all they care about right now. They want to see that people are subscribed.
Okay.
I was like, wouldn't you want to know if people are listening?
What was the podcast site that just rated us the #1
Oh,
automotive
that
podcast?
Feed spot thing? I don't know.
Yeah.
FeedSpot. I think it was FeedSpot.
Yeah, that was kind of neat. We didn't know
Looks
that.
like they go around and they gather podcast subscribers and Facebook likes and all that stuff, and they put them all together, and that looks like kind of like how they're ranking.
Yeah,
it, so.
I kind of noticed that too. But we were the #1 automotive podcast on that.
That was fun. It made my day a little happier.
Yeah, a little smile.
that's nice to see.
A little more of a smile than producer Doug had on earlier.
Yeah, no kidding.
Back to that again because that's about
Jeez.
where we quit. Now now let's go back.